Hi, I'm Stephen from TLF. At our conference this year, I spoke about trust. This is a quick summary of what I said. Who do you trust? We asked 1,000 of our panellists to tell us how much they trusted different people, on a scale where 10 is completely trust and 1 is completely distrust. It's no surprise that partner, family and friends do so well, although 7% of people scored their partner 5 or less. The rest of the chart is more interesting. We avoided the easy pickings by trying to make it more personal. Not politicians, but politicians in the party that you voted for. Not banks or bankers, but your bank. And we left estate agents out altogether. This chart gives us a pretty good sense of where we sit in terms of trust between organisations and their customers, and also within organisations. Interestingly, on average, people trust their bank more than they do their colleagues, their staff, or their boss. They trust senior managers slightly less than people in general. Trust, I believe, is the single most important factor within organisations and in their relationships with customers. If we get it right, then we'll be looking at a future in which customer experiences are easier, more personal, and more streamlined, where our people enjoy working together to build relationships with customers, and where everything is done for a reason. That can feel like it's a long way away, and the path to it is anything but straightforward. So I want to talk about some of the things we need to do to find our way there. There are several models of trust, all of which capture the idea that it has different dimensions. That means that, for instance, although I trust my brother, I probably don't trust him to operate on my brain. Looking across the models for overlaps, we could summarise these dimensions down to 3 things: character, competence, and connection. We talk about trusting objects as much as we talk about trusting people or businesses. What do we mean? Basically that they're fit for purpose and we can depend on them to do the job. What about people? Fundamentally, it's similar. Are they the right person for the job? Are they reliable? But there has actually been an important shift here. The kind of trust we have in tools is very simple. We want them to do exactly what we ask every time. That's not the kind of trust we have in a human expert. From a person, we expect initiative. We expect them to do the right thing, not necessarily the thing we ask them to do. We want them to anticipate problems and prevent them. There's also an added human dimension. How much do we connect with them? And this turns out to be surprisingly important. Computers are now better at diagnosing some types of cancer and other health problems than doctors are. But who would you rather hear the diagnosis from? This is what will save us from being replaced by AI. Geoff Colvin, in his superb book Humans Are Underrated, shows that asking what can't computers do is the wrong approach, because their abilities keep surprising us. So instead of asking what computers can't do, let's ask which jobs we will insist should be performed by humans. In other words, where some of the intrinsic value of the experience comes from that human interaction. Empathy is the key. In a face-to-face human interaction, empathy is powerfully present because it's face-to-face. When we feel that someone we're talking to is sad, for example, we feel sad too. At the same time, unconsciously, our pupils contract. The person we're talking to also unconsciously sees that. We feel a sense of connection, a bond, a shared emotion. And it goes far deeper than just seeing that someone else has a facial expression that we can categorise as sad. Empathy, to quote Geoff Colvin, is the basis of every significant relationship, and that includes our relationships at work and with customers. It's been shown that patients with more empathetic doctors have better clinical outcomes, so this has real effects. EQ, or emotional intelligence, is becoming more important while computers take over some of the more IQ-heavy jobs. One of the problems with IQ is that it's an individual measure, and we very rarely work in isolation. So is there such a thing as team IQ? There is. And the interesting thing is that it's unrelated to the IQs of the members of the team. unrelated to the IQ of its members, but strongly related to their social sensitivity, their empathy, their ability to build effective relationships, or their EQ. That means that a cheerful team of idiots will consistently outperform a collection of smart loners. It hinges on the ability of teams working like this to generate lots of ideas, with everyone contributing and evaluating them collectively. Effective turn-taking, a lack of competition for status, a giver culture, not a taker culture. So what type of people are you recruiting? What makes for high-performing creative teams? Trust built on interaction. One of the crucial things here is to accept the fact that good teams are far more than the sum of their parts. That means that getting teams to bond and then keeping them together becomes paramount. When Steve Jobs stepped down as CEO of Apple in 2011, his inner circle of execs had been working together as a team for 13 years. That's not just unusual, it sounds almost absurd, doesn't it? On the flip side, the National Transportation Safety Board keeps a database of airline incidents. 73% of them occurred on the first day a crew flew together. So let's start moving towards a conclusion. Is there anyone who does this really well? Well, first of all, a bit of fun. We asked our panellists which famous people, alive or dead, they most trusted and distrusted. This chart shows the number of positive mentions on the vertical axis against the number of negative mentions on the horizontal axis. Needless to say, it's not looking terribly good for the Prime Minister. Most people seem to fall back on a relatively small number of saints and sinners, and there are only a handful of polarising figures, such as Margaret Thatcher in the middle there. We also asked people, with a completely free choice, to name an organisation that they trust. 42% of people didn't answer or name something that wasn't an organisation. Quite a few of them said myself. There were some slightly depressing comments, and some quite funny ones. When we grouped responses into sectors, something else quite interesting emerged. Contrary to what media coverage would have you believe, banks are second only to the health sector at the forefront of people's thoughts when it comes to trust. However much we distrust bankers, we still trust our own bank to be competent and reliable with our money. There is, I think, the potential to create a win-win-win for organisations, their people and their customers. We do it by letting computers handle the things that they do best and letting humans get on with being human. What qualities are we looking for from those humans? Empathy, creative problem solving, decision making and the skill to build relationships with customers. One more finding for you from our survey. We asked people to rank 8 potential channels for finding out some information in terms of how much they would trust the information from each channel. Customers trust what your staff tell them, much more than the carefully crafted words you put online or into automated messages. Just like patients with a diagnosis, we want to hear it from a person. Those empathy building skills at the front line will only pay off if we create a culture that rewards and permits them, a culture built on trust. The companies that master this will increasingly come to dominate markets through service that is simultaneously slicker and warmer, more automated and more personal, reliably predictable when I want a tool, and reassuringly human when I want a connection. Trustworthy, in other words.